Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 27 of the Cultured Pull List. In this week's episode, we're going to be covering DC's Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes Book 1, which collects the first 12 issues of the Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes comic series. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hey everyone, Mike here. I am still without Luke for these opening and summary sections, but he is still going to be with me for the discussion and review section. So, yeah. Now, the Blue Beetle movie is coming out this weekend. It's actually out by the time this comes out. This episode comes out. And so we decided to cover the first 12 issues, the original issues of the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle series. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jaime Reyes is actually the third Blue Beetle. Ted Kord and Dan Garrett came before him, but Ted was more like Batman. He didn't actually have any powers. He was just rich and had a lot of gadgets. Whereas Dan Garrett was actually able to harness the power of the Scarab, which will, if you don't know anything about Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes, then you'll learn more as we go through this book. But the Scarab, Jaime is the first person to actually have the Scarab attach itself to him and become a host for it. And speaking of Ted Kord and Dan Garrett, their costumes are actually shown in the trailer for the Blue Beetle movie, which is kind of fun. But anyway, let's get into the comic here. So, Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes Book 1 was written by Keith Giffen and John Rogers. Art by, well, there's a lot of artists for this one. Art by Cully Hamner, Duncan Ralou, Raphael Alborque, Cynthia Martin, Kevin West, Phil Moy, Jack Purcell, and Casey Jones. The colorists are David Self and Guy Major, and the letterers are Phil Balsman, Pat Brossow, and Jared K. Fletcher. So this book does cover 12 issues of the series, so that is quite a few. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through these. This is going to be kind of a crash course of these issues. I'm going to make sure to cover everything that's really important to the story, though, so don't worry. But our story picks up with Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, crashing to Earth in his armor, and we're not. This is kind of where the book just dumps us out, where we really don't have any info yet. But he's quickly attacked by Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, who seems to be in a rage and not really himself, trying to attack him. Then we do a flashback, and this kind of happens throughout the next three issues. It's kind of cutting back and forth between now and, like, I guess a while ago. And we see Jaime with his friends Paco and Brenda. They're walking home from school, and Jaime finds this scarab just hanging out on the side of the road as they're walking home. And then we're introduced to Jaime's family, his little sister, and his mom, and his dad. He goes and sees his dad at his mechanic shop, and his dad's been pulling a lot of overtime because his deadbeat uncle won't show up to his shifts. Then we cut back to Guy Gardner and Blue Beetle now. Guy realizes that he's the new Blue Beetle and he's just a kid, so he stops attacking him, kind of regains composure, and it says that the ring was kind of filling him with rage and making him want to kill Jaime. It kind of made him not himself. But when Guy leaves, the armor just kind of peels off of Jaime and leaves him naked in the desert all by himself. Then we cut back to when the scarab first activates while Jaime is sleeping and attaches itself to his spine, and he starts thinking and speaking in this alien language that isn't known to him. So the next day, he explains this to Brenda and Paco, who think he's kind of crazy. But then he sees this eyeless lady talking to him, saying that you're going to see us soon enough. But his friends can't see this lady. Then we go back to Jaime in the desert, unfortunately clothless, wandering around in the El Paso desert. Then we cut back to Jaime talking with his friends, and we do see this eyeless lady again with somebody else. They said that they're part of something called the posse, and they're super powered. This guy Damper is actually making them invisible, so Paco and Brenda can't see them, but Jaime's able to with this scarab that just attached itself to him. And this eyeless lady tries to probe. That's actually her name, but the scarab prevents that from happening and actually kind of messes up her brain. So then we cut back to Jaime. He finds a gas station, and this nice gas station owner ends up giving Jaime some clothes from the Goodwill donation bin and driving him home to his folks and giving him some food. So then we go cut back to the past. The posse actually finds Jaime. They track Jaime down at his dad's mechanic shop and they attack him in an alley outside. And Jaime, this is the first time the Blue Beetle armor actually um, covers, actually comes out. And Jaime's actually able to defeat the posse, kind of slap him around. And then he flies away and goes home. Then we cut back to now, where Jaime sneaks into his room through his window, and he sees his little sister in his bed, and kind of surprised that she's moved in already just after being gone for a few nights. Um, but then his mom bursts into his room, and it's revealed that he's actually been gone for a whole year, and his parents have like been worried sick about him. Then we cut to the next issue where this bleach blonde guy is at the gas station with the kindly gas station owner. He saves the owner from a robbery and ends up driving away. And then we see Jaime reveal his Blue Beetle armor to his family for the first time, who are kind of freaked out. His sister runs away and his mom comforts her, but his dad reassures him that they'll calm down, everything will be all right. They're just happy he's home. So then Jaime goes and tries out his powers, trying to figure out exactly what he can do. Scarab has been talking to him this whole time, and we learn that it can just do all sorts of stuff, like zoom in on stuff, and he can hear a lot of different things. But he also figures out some of the cool things that his limbs and the armor can generate, which is pretty cool. But the scarab reveals that it can actually create clothing, so he doesn't have to be naked all the time after the armor comes off. So Jaime goes to try and find his friend Paco, who is now actually hanging out and part of the posse. And they're attacked by these guys working for somebody named Ladama, but he's able to save Paco. So then they go and find Brenda, who has moved because her dad was really abusive, and his dad, she ended up getting taken in by her aunt after her dad was killed, which we do learn later was actually her aunt that killed him. And we actually learn in this frame that Brenda's aunt is this Ladama character that these guys in suits were working for. So then we see Jaime. He's looking up the past Blue Beetles, Dan Garrett and Ted Cord, specifically Dan Garrett. And while this is happening, while he's researching, he's contacted by Oracle. And they just have a brief conversation, but Jaime's kind of turned off because of she's a creepy computer lady, so things don't really go further from there. But we do see this guy named Diviner who works for Ladama, Brenda's aunt, and Ladama sends Diviner to take care of Jaime, basically, to get him away from her niece, I guess is the idea, and also because he thwarted her attempt to kidnap Paco. So this Diviner guy uses a spell to make the trees come alive, basically, but the Jaime and his armor are actually able to disrupt the energy from the Diviner's spell and stop the monsters. But Diviner is able to figure out that Blue Beetle is Jaime, Brenda's friend, and he tells Ladama. So then we cut to Jaime hanging out on some park bench, and this guy is talking to him, saying something about this new age of magic, and that Jaime is going to lead him to who he's seeking, and it turns out it's the Phantom Stranger. Then we see Ladama talking to Brenda, just kind of trying to get information about her from her about Jaime. Meanwhile, Paco introduces Jaime to the posse, who aren't super keen to meet him after their last encounter a year ago where he beat them up, but they explain that the posse isn't really a gang so much as it is just a group of superpowered outcasts. And apparently, Ladama and her crew have been kidnapping superpowered beings, and that's actually what happened to Probe. after her brain got fried by Jaime and the Scarab. She was put in a hospital, but she disappeared after that. So then we see Diviner, and he summons this weird undead, like hunchback freak guy to go after Damper's baby. Actually, they want to kidnap the baby because she's the child of two superpowered beings, Damper and his girlfriend Bonita. So he does. He goes and he kidnaps the baby, and Jaime vows to go save the baby, save their child. And so he goes after this guy. His name is Bottom Feeder, nice name, and he saves the baby. But then he needs to save everybody in this pile up, and the bleach blonde hair guy on the motorcycle shows up and helps Jaime, and Jaime is able to defeat Bottom Feeder. And in the next issue, we see the bleach blonde hair guy who was actually who he and Jaime parted ways after the battle. It seems like he's tracking somebody down, and then we cut to Jaime and the posse, and they're gonna break into this prison which is where Ladama is keeping all the superpowered beings she kidnapped. So using Damper's powers, they sneak in, but they're quickly found out, and there's a big fight that breaks out between the superpowered beings inside and the posse. And after a battle, after a brief battle, Phantom Stranger shows up, and it turns out he was looking for Ladama because of all of the magically powered beings she had kidnapped, and it kind of doesn't seem that consequential to this story. I'm not sure if it ends up being more important later on in this series, but for this book, not so much. But we do learn that even though Ladama kidnapped these people, all these superpowered beings, they kind of want to stay there because she actually provided a decent home for them. So some of them decide to leave. About half of them decide to leave, but the other half decide to stay. And Ladama lets them leave, but she does threaten Jaime, and she says that she's going to reveal his secret identity to the world if he gets in her way again. And Jaime says that he's going to reveal to Brenda that she's basically this weird, superpowered crime lord lady. Well, not superpowered, but dealing with superpowered beings. So she says, okay, we're basically at a stalemate. And they mention at some point that Jaime thinks that the scarab is magic at this point, but the blonde guy comes in who actually saved Paco from Ladama's men in a previous frame, and he says that it's not magic, it's extraterrestrial. And then then we cut to the next issue where Jaime shows his parents, his family, and his friends where he actually crash landed in the El Paso desert, shows a big crater. And Jaime reveals to his family that this guy is actually Peacemaker, and he actually is connected to this scarab, which we'll learn why later. But he's basically there to just kind of keep an eye on Jaime because he seems to know more about the scarab than Jaime does at this point, and he doesn't trust it. So then Jaime explains to his parents how he's been gone this long. It turns out that during the Infinite Crisis storyline, Booster Gold recruited Jaime to help the Justice League take down Brother Eye, which was this big satellite that Batman created that ended up finding a mind of its own. And he explains that after they destroyed the satellite and the Green Lantern showed up, the armor automatically just turned invisible because it was afraid of the Green Lanterns for some reason, and ended up transporting Jaime to this like space between dimensions using energy from the Brother Eye satellite. And basically only like a few minutes in this in between dimension was a whole year on Earth. So after he like comes out of that dimension, a whole year had passed. And yeah, Jaime's pretty upset. The whole experience was pretty traumatic, and he's kind of re-experiencing all this. So in the next issue, Jaime, Brenda, and Peacemaker are off to speak with Dan Garrett's surviving relative, his granddaughter, who explains to them that her father found the scarab in some pyramid in some Middle Eastern country, and explains that he was able to access the powers of the scarab. Like, it was able to give him superpowers, but he didn't become its host. And after he died, Ted Cord took the scarab along with a lot of other Dan Garrett's but belongings, kind of inherited the mantle of Blue Beetle. But the scarab was never able to be activated. But their visit is interrupted when Bottom Feeder shows up in the town they're visiting and starts killing people. So then Jaime shows up and fights him, and he and Peacemaker are able to defeat Bottom Feeder again with this nerve gas Peacemaker makes. And in the next issue, we see all of the notes that Dan Garrett's granddaughter, Danny Garrett, has on the scarab. And so they start unpacking and looking through these notes. And while they're looking, Peacemaker explains to them how he has a connection to the scarab. Basically, he was on some mission in some other country fighting Intergang, and he ends up getting blown into the same pyramid that Dan Garrett fell into. But instead of finding the scarab, which is already gone, he finds this weird technology buried in a sarcophagus, and he ends up touching it, even though it's glowing blue. And he even admits that this was a bad idea. And it kind of melds with his mind a little bit, and seems like the information. It seems like information that should be on the scarab but isn't was transported and moved into his mind. So he's basically got information that the scarab should have but doesn't. Then later on, Jaime and Paco are hanging out, and Paco reveals that he got some. He made some new friends who are able to basically be Jaime's guys in the chair, kind of his technological support. Then we see Brenda at her aunt's house, and she sneaks into her aunt's office and finds this weird box, which ends up transporting her somewhere else. So Ladama, her aunt, freaks out and calls in Jaime to help, even though they're kind of enemies. And then we cut to Brenda. She's been transported to some weird planet. These weird little aliens kind of befriend her and take her in. And after some research, Jaime's able to figure out that the box is actually a mother box, and he's able to activate it and get transported to where Brenda is. But as soon as he is transported and vomited out this boom tube, he ends up getting attacked by these machines, automated machines. He ends up breaking them and looks for Brenda, who is being attacked by the little aliens that befriended her, and they think she's some sort of sacred being, but they also need to sacrifice her. But she's saved by this guy who is a new god. He calls himself a new god. And right after he saves Brenda, she passes out from the injury she sustained, and Jaime attacks the new god because he thinks that he's the one that attacked Brenda. And as they're battling, Metron, the new god, shows up, and Brenda manages to talk Jaime down and explains that this guy saved her. I forget his name, Lonar. And Lonar and Metron explain to Jaime that this planet was like a safe haven for new gods that they could get transported to if anything ever happened to New Genesis, their planet. And Metron is able to scan Jaime's armor and says he has information on it, but before he can tell Jaime about it, the little aliens kind of come and apologize basically for trying to kill Brenda. And Lonar and Metron explain that this planet was made into some kind of death trap by some malicious force, some bad guy. And so they all agree to team up to destroy basically the base of operations of the whole automated death trap program, I guess what you want to call it. So they are successful. They're able to destroy all of the automated traps and weapons, and Jaime and Brenda are able to get transported back to Earth. But Jaime was told by Lonar and Metron to destroy the mother box because it's kind of confusing, but it seems like its master died and it kind of wants to die. So Jaime kills it, puts it out of its misery, I guess. Much to Ladama's chagrin, she wanted to use it for something. And then in the next issue, we see Jaime and Peacemaker discover this livestock on somebody's farm being totally obliterated by these alien technology. They're not sure what it is, but it's obviously some sort of energy weapons being used. So Jaime and Peacemaker are able to track down whatever it is to these abandoned mine tunnels. And it turns out it's this Reach machine, which was mentioned. The Reach was mentioned earlier by Bottom Feeder a few issues ago. He said something like the Reach is coming, but we don't know what it is yet, or at least Jaime and Peacemaker don't. But it seems like this machine is made from the same technology as Jaime's armor, and Jaime's armor won't come out and fight it and says that it's against the rules. But they're able to uh, chase the whatever it is device or creature or something to the gas station that we seem to keep coming back to. And Jaime is actually able to gain control of the armor and use it to fight it. And he and Peacemaker are able to defeat the machine. And right as they do, this alien shows up, says he is from the Reach. He's like an emissary from the Reach, and that they're here to save Earth, and that Jaime's Scarab is actually this scout device, basically, that they send to planets to prepare them. We're not sure what for exactly, to prepare for what. And that is unfortunately where this ends. Kind of a cliffhanger, but that's where this book ends. Yeah, all right. So this is, I think, really the first time I've really read much of the Blue Beetle comics.
Mm,
Um, like I had read his he's been in a bunch of other like Justice League crossover type stuff, so I've read about him in there. But like I was really introduced
right.
to him actually from an action figure. Um,
Mm,
I was just like hanging out in the toy section when I was like, I don't know, like 10, 12. Um, and there was just like an action figure of Blue Beetle there. And I was familiar with Ted Kord's Blue Beetle at that point from Death of Superman.
okay.
So I just looked, I was like, oh, what the heck is this? This doesn't look like Blue Beetle. And then like I just read the back, and you know how the action figures have like bios on the back, and
Right, right.
it just kind of gave like a brief bio of Jaime, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that's kind of my introduction, and then like I've
Mm,
seen him in comics, and then obviously in like the cartoons like Young Justice and video games
yeah,
like
yeah.
Injustice 2, uh. But yeah, what did you think of this? Like this is like the first 12 issues of I guess his first series. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting. You mentioned Young Justice, and that was kind of my
Yes.
introduction to
Yeah.
pretty much like all of DC, but specifically
Okay.
season two it focused a lot on the
Well,
Blue Beetle
that's a pretty good
specifically.
introduction to DC. It's kind of like it
Yeah,
says Young Justice, but it's basically a DC Universe cartoon.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, and season two focuses a lot on specifically
Yes.
Jaime Reyes, and so
Yeah.
reading this, it's been a long time since I've seen that show, but a lot of this seemed kind of familiar to me. So
Yes.
I guess they like borrowed a lot from
Mm-hmm.
the specific comic.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, which is kind of cool. I mean, I know they've like done some retooling and reboots since, with New
Right.
52, Rebirth, and then there's like the newer like comic Graduation Year, which we like covered one issue, I think, because
Hmm,
you
hmm.
read it, weren't a huge
Yeah.
fan, but yeah, it was.
Right.
But yeah, the cartoon was it was Young Justice was kind of an introduction for a lot of people, and it was like really like I kind of knew his origin, but I didn't know a whole lot about him. I didn't really know about the Reach and everything. That show
Yeah.
really delved into the Reach, which this book really only touched on at the very end, which sucked. It kind of
Mm,
left you on a
mhm.
cliffhanger. I'm like, oh dang, we're
Right.
just getting into the Reach stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, what did you think about? Because I know one thing Young Justice didn't do as much because he was mostly with the team. There wasn't as much of the family dynamic. Like it was there in episodes that
Sure.
focused specifically on him, but the comic delves a lot into his family. Like they're there all the time, and he's actually one of the few superheroes that not only has like a big family that he relies on
Right.
regularly, but he's also really one of the only heroes that, especially like teen heroes, that just right from the start, like their parents pretty much know who they are, and like
Mm,
they're a superhero. Like in a lot of ways, he feels like Spider-Man, but
yeah.
in that big way, he's not at all because he just like is really upfront with his family, and he even asks his parents, if he can go like save people
Mm,
from a fire at one point, and he's like, well, as long as you
right.
finish your homework.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of fun, and it seems like they're going to definitely tackle that in the movie,
Yeah.
from what I've seen in the trailers and from what I've heard and everything. So That should be interesting. Though they definitely did make some changes because his sister is quite a bit younger than him in this. In the
Hmm. Hmm.
comic, whereas in the movie, it seems like she's only like a couple years younger. She seems like a teenager while he's like college age.
Yeah, yeah.
But I really enjoyed seeing his power set, just like how the
Mm,
armor works, how the scarab works. Because on the surface, there's a lot of just him making cannons and blades and stuff like that, which is really cool. But there really is a whole other side to it that I kind of like. I don't know if I'd say forgot, but kind of just took for granted the whole side of the scarab that can calculate things and like you can
mm.
even scanned Danny Garrett to the point where it could predict that she was going to get diabetes in 3 years. It's all
Yeah.
like these crazy, like really analytical things it can do. I kind of forgot that it could do all that. And it's pretty
Right,
cool.
right.
I think it's almost like a mix of like Venom, um, Iron Man, and like Green Lantern. Just the fact that you can just
Mm,
like create
yeah.
anything he wants, but there is like that AI kind of like an Iron Man suit, but then it's like bonded to him like the symbiote, like the Venom
Yeah,
symbiote. It's kind of cool, but
yeah.
then he's more like Spider Man in I think personality and just like his situation where he's a high school student.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
He's a really interesting character in that way. So I've always loved Jaime Reyes. Just from
Oh, yeah.
everything I knew about him, and it was really cool to kind of actually see his origin because I knew it, but I didn't like know it
Mm,
firsthand. Like it feels different actually reading, the
yeah.
origin that as opposed to just knowing it because I kind of forgot, where the scarab like popped up. I kind of thought that it was different. I kind of forgot that it got blown like all the way to El Paso, no?
Right,
Which
right.
was interesting, and I kind of didn't realize until I kind of went into it. I didn't actually read the whole thing, but yeah, we were initially going to tackle Infinite Crisis first because that's where
Mm,
he first pops up.
right.
But we didn't have time for that for a few different reasons. But um, I did go back and kind of read the parts of the Infinite Crisis run that he pops up in,
Okay.
and yeah, I did not know about that at all. Like he first shows up and he's just like chilling in his bedroom. He's already had this scarab, so the comic series we just read kind of backtracks a little bit to before he got the scarab. But he
Okay,
already
yeah.
has the scarab. He's already like done very minimal things with it. But then
Mhm.
Booster Gold shows up and is like, "Hey, we need you. Come with me." Like apparently like Skeets, Booster Gold's little assistant. I guess like because they know the history because they're from the future. They knew that they
Mm,
needed they needed Jaime to
yeah.
help them out with the Brother Eye satellite
Mhm.
that Batman made, and yeah, just very interesting. So Booster Gold takes him to the Bat Cave, and then he like teams up with the Justice League. So like his introduction is very much like he just thrust into helping out the Justice League. Is kind of interesting.
Mhm, mhm.
Almost reminds me a bit of like Spider-Man in Civil War. Like he just pops up and has to
Right,
like fight a
right.
bunch of like A-list heroes and then leave. But in
Exactly.
this case, he's gone for a whole year.
Mm, mhm.
Which,
One
yeah,
oh,
what? Go
well, I
go
was
ahead.
gonna kinda change the subject. One thing I
Yeah,
thought was kinda interesting was, how they incorporated Peacemaker into it.
yeah. I did not expect that when that guy showed up. I was like, who the hell is this? And then they're like, oh, he,
Right.
he calls himself Peacemaker. I'm like, what?
Wait, what?
Where's
Yeah, and
the
it's
where's the toilet bowl on his
exactly.
head?
Right, 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 and it kind of makes sense if you think about it
Yeah.
because, in, like, the '80s, I think, maybe earlier, DC Comics bought
Mm-hmm.
Charleston Comics, and
Mm.
the original Blue Beetle, Garrett and
Uh-huh.
Peacemaker and a bunch of other characters as well, were part of that group, and so I
Oh,
think in
interesting.
doing this, they're trying to tie all of those characters together. Whether or not it worked, I don't know, but that's what they're
Mm-hmm.
attempting to do.
I see. Yeah, because I mean, Peacemaker does show up in like Crisis on Infinite Earths and stuff.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, seeing him like kind of out of costume was interesting, and he's basically a retired
yeah,
hero at this point. He's more
yeah,
like a mercenary, which was
uh
yeah. What I found very interesting was that he had a connection to the Scarab. That was
mm,
a very interesting twist that made him integral to
yeah, yeah.
Jaime and his development as a hero. I thought that was interesting, and it was very interesting, the dynamic. Like Jaime even says he expected him to be more of like a mentor than he was. He was more just like
Mm,
kind of there because I guess he didn't trust the Scarab was a big reason, and that was
right,
kind of
right.
interesting. Cause so he was kind of an ally, but kind of there to like
Mm,
make sure he didn't freak out or the Scarab didn't do anything.
exactly, exactly.
I thought it was interesting also, which I already knew because I already knew, how the Scarab worked and everything. But I found
Mhm.
it interesting how they just kind of slowly teased at what it was and like just kind of
Yeah.
revealed a little bit of information like every issue until at the
Mhm.
end it's revealed by that Reach guy that it's which I forget exactly what he says, but it's more of like he did say it was kind of a sent places to prepare the way or whatever.
Yeah.
Almost kind of reminded me of Galactus's heralds, you know.
Mm,
And he even
yeah.
said something about like we're merchants or traders or something, which
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, no they're not. So yeah, I find that interesting, and yeah, I'm kind of bummed that there wasn't more Reach stuff in this. But I'm guessing there's. I don't even know if
Yeah.
there's a book two yet because this was only published like last October.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, not the original stories, but this collection.
Right. The collected edition. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, all in all, it was very cool. Really
Mhm.
fun. I had a lot of fun with this, and yeah, that is something too. This was really fun, and there's a lot of humor in this.
Yeah.
Um, it's not like other comics don't, but it really depends on the comic and the writer and the
Right.
tone they're going for. But there was a lot of like jokes in this, and a lot of them were kind of subtle, and I thought that was
Mhm. Mhm.
fun. Um,
Right.
and oh yeah, and he had, like his two best friends. Like I'm not familiar with them like at all. Uh,
Yeah.
I feel like every adaptation so far in like media has been riffs off of those characters. I guess I don't know
Mm.
because I forget the name of his best friend in Young Justice, but he was like kidnapped by the Reach or something. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas in this it's Brenda and Paco, and
Right.
I feel like in the movie that's coming out,
Mhm.
um, I feel like Brenda is kind of replaced with this Jenny character, um,
Okay.
played by Bruna Marquezine, and she's actually Ted Kord's daughter. So I feel like they kind of combined Danny Garrett and Brenda to make
Mm.
this other like Jenny Cord character because it seems like she's gonna be Jaime's friend, but she also
Yeah.
seems like she's kind of there to give exposition on like what the Scarab is, and from the
Right.
perspective of the offspring of somebody who had an intimate connection with it. Like in this book, it was um Daniel Garrett or Dan Garrett's granddaughter, whereas in
Yeah.
in the movie, it seems like it's gonna be Ted Kord's daughter.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So yeah, pretty interesting. A lot of issues, but it read pretty quick to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, do you have anything else to say before we do our cultured picks?
Um, no, it's just a good story, kind of a good introduction to the character and the
Mm-hmm.
lore, I guess, of
Yeah,
the whole Blue Beetle
yeah,
character.
yeah. What did you think of the artwork?
I mean, I think it did its job. It wasn't
Yeah,
particularly good or bad, and I
sure.
think it was, it was just there.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a second to get used to it,
Okay.
especially coming from Infinite Crisis, which I think is a little more like real to life looking. This had a
Mhm.
little bit more of like a cartoony look, but it still
Sure.
looked good.
Yeah.
It looked fine. But yeah, last week I totally messed up with the cultured picks. I said that I read Venom Lethal Protector 2 issue 1,
Mhm.
which I did, but that's something completely different. I went on to describe Venom issue
Uh,
21.
I
um
wasn't gonna say anything, but I was thinking like I didn't read that one.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh no, they printed two different versions of Lethal Protector.
Yeah,
No. Yeah. So
exactly.
Lethal Protector 2 was more like just going back and telling another story back when Eddie was still like during like the time of the original Lethal Protector
Right.
series in the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas what I was talking about, Venom issue 21, was what I described, where
Mm.
Eddie battles his a version of his older self. So yeah, I think I
Yeah.
realized that I was actually in the middle of like I was in the movie theater that weekend watching a movie, and I was like, wait a minute, that's not the right like it was such a
Right.
random realization, but yeah.
Yeah.
But the one I wanted to my culture pick I wanted to talk about this week is Berserker Poetry of Madness #1.
Okay.
It's created. It's actually a 2021 series. I did not realize that there was a Berserker series, or I forgot about it. But it's created by Keanu Reeves.
Okay. Yeah, I heard about this.
Yeah, so there was a Berserker series, like same character in 2021, like 12 issues,
Mhm.
and I guess they're coming out with a 2 issue like prequel
Okay.
mini series. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's kind of
Mm.
it's weird as hell, but in like a cool way. Like, and it's very bloody and very gory, but
Yeah.
apparently he's just the title character. I'm just gonna call him Immortal Keanu. He he's like, I guess, like the defender of the King of Atlantis before Atlantis sinks. um
Mm.
but and he can like heal. He's basically Wolverine, but like he's like if Wolverine and Kratos had a baby, I guess.
Ah.
So he can like heal from any injury, but he's like an insanely strong warrior. And the king is like corrupt, and he has like these weird associates who end up summoning Cthulhu. And so
Mm.
it's basically ends up just becoming Immortal Keanu fighting Cthulhu, and it's pretty nuts.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. I'm definitely gonna read the second issue, but yeah, it's pretty fun,
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Nice. Nice. So my pick this week was they released this technically when it came out last month. They re-released the first issue of Wanted by Mark Miller. So it was his
Oh yeah,
first series before he went on to write Kick-Ass and all that other stuff. So I
right.
picked it up and it was really really interesting because a few
Okay.
weeks ago I talked about Big Game, which was the big crossover of all of his
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
the villains of that are like the fraternity of supervillains, that kind of like a secret society.
Uh huh.
And so this story is basically this guy who's basically like the most uh generic dude. Like imagine like the main character of Fight Club pretty much.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so one day he finds out that his dad was a supervillain, but he died. And so
Oh.
then the fraternity are like, you are gonna inherit all of his money, but you have to join us.
Hmm.
And so it's really interesting. It's only
Interesting.
the first issue, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting.
Huh. Um. That's is that what the movie Wanted, like the James McAvoy Angelina Jolie movie?
Yes.
Is that based off of that? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes, yes it is.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never seen that, but
I haven't either.
I was aware it was a comic. I forgot it was Mark Miller. I think I saw that re-released issue in the
Mhm.
shop.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that a new like launch, or is it a re-release? But yeah, I guess it's a
Yeah.
re-release. Which
Mhm.
they also released like the very first issue of Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did actually pick that up. I wasn't sure if it was a re-release or not. I thought it might be, but yeah, it was. But it was, yeah, kind of interesting how they're doing that. I
Yeah.
guess I
Yeah.
mean I don't know like a whole lot about history of comic publishing. Is that like a newer thing to re-release the like older comics, or have they been doing that kind of crap all
Yeah.
along?
I'm not sure because I know back when I started getting into comics with DC Rebirth, some of those relaunches were so popular that they had to like reprint them like right
Mm,
away. But I've
yeah.
never heard of them reprinting like decades later. I've never heard of something like that.
Right, yeah. They also recently republished in like a special edition The Death of Superman. Um
Yeah, I saw that.
which was interesting. And yeah, I think I did have like I do have a second printing of the first issue of Avengers versus X-Men, because like what you said, it was
Mm.
like so popular they had to like print it a second time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I've never heard of them republishing decades old stuff, but
Yeah.
Maybe they have. I have no idea.
Exactly.
But yeah, that is our show for this week, everyone.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it, and definitely check out the movie Blue Beetle. You know, if you want to.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
if you enjoyed this, hopefully you'll enjoy that. And yeah, we'll see you next time. This has been the Cultured Pull List. If you would like to help support us, so we can keep bringing you more content, check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's specific tier. I have been your host, Michael Malillo. My co host is Luke S. Our Patreon supporters are Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. Huge thanks to all of you. We could not do this without you. Also, big thanks to Jose Navarro, who designed our logo and visual assets. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out our other videos if you liked this one. And stay tuned every week for another episode. If you'd like to check out the Cultured Nerd and the Cultured Pull List on social media, scan the QR code on the bottom left. If you'd like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's brand, which includes Casual Experts Only, a podcast part of the Cultured Nerd Network where we talk about all things pop culture and nerd centered, check out the QR code on the bottom right. Oh, you could pause.